So the last point that I want to make about the problems with how we typically conceptualize the problems is that there's generally a misalignment between popular culture and how they understand sexuality and pornography addiction, certainly, and the scientific world's understanding of it. So we have a lot of individuals that will come in and use language that I have heard politicians use. Porn is an epidemic to society. They will kind of make their some of the talking points that maybe are common knowledge in terms of culture, like this Time magazine cover page and the article about really the harm of porn, and making porn the enemy. And that's interesting to think about, because if someone has like a compulsion to wash their hands over and over again, we don't have an issue with hand washing. We talk about it in terms of a compulsivity, something that doesn't feel quite in control. But we don't generally focus on the sink, or the water, or the soap, but in culture, or at least popular culture's understanding, that is how we treat pornography. That it's actually the hand washing that's the problem, not the relationship to hand washing, which is really what we're trying to look at. What is a person's relationship to their sexuality and their relationship to pornography? That's really what we want to spend a bit more time on, rather than pathologizing certain behaviors. But that's a big concern, because we might have a different understanding of these issues than our clients do, and we need to be able to meet them at a certain juncture to have some common language, and to not try to tell them that they're wrong about certain things, but maybe that they're not fully educated on some of the diverse knowledge that is in the area. The Time magazine here kind of makes it sound like all the research is in on porn, and that it's bad. Even the young men who grew up with it say that it's bad, as if that offers any more legitimacy to it being bad, or that it was really just because culturally they were told it was bad. And then what happens is they have moral incongruity between actually looking at pornography, their behaviors, and what they would like to do in their ideal values, which might not include porn. So it's more of a moral incongruity that causes the distress with our clients. So we need to pay attention to these issues, because we don't want to alienate clients who have maybe found some solace in understanding their issues through some of these frames. It doesn't mean that they're wrong, to experience it in that way. But we do want to help them see maybe more fully some of the other areas that we've learned do require some attention in that treatment. So we've gone through the problems. Like I said, there's about 20 of them there. We've gone through some of the issues with how we've traditionally conceptualized those problems. So we want to keep that kind of in the background, in the back of our mind, whenever we're thinking about how we conceptualize problems with clients. And now we're going to go through 4 client profiles. And these are going to be the clients that were focused on working through this whole process today with. So I'm skipping over what you might do like in the first few sessions to assess what the problems are, taking a sex history. So I'm just going to present that information as if you had done a comprehensive sex history. When you are, when I'm talking about what these client profiles are, I want you to think about a few different questions to have in mind. So what are your emotional responses to these clients? So what happens to you as I start to talk about each of these clients? Pay attention to that. Does your personal experience come up when I talk about the clients? So think about that. Do you start to fit it into some personal experience that you have? Just notice that for now. What do you start thinking about with clients that present with these issues? So where does your mind start to go with it? How do you try to organize and assemble this? And then basically I'm going to do some of that construction, and at the end of each client profile, have a list of what the problems are that we are going to attempt to treat with some interventions. So let's start with Rachel and Danny. So Rachel is 28, Danny's 31, and Rachel is saying that Danny is addicted to pornography. She says it's ruining their marriage, and she considers it cheating. Danny disagrees. He doesn't watch more porn than his friends do, so he doesn't really see what the big fuss is about from Rachel. And Danny has some resentment towards Rachel, says that she's not meeting his sexual needs. So a bit of a rationalization there, or a relational dynamic that will need to be addressed. And similarly, Rachel is angry that Danny seems to prefer his porn more than sex with her. So I'm sure you've all experienced clients where it feels like an affair for one of the partners because they see the other partner making a choice in their mind between pornography and their partner. And if their partner doesn't win that choice, then they feel very rejected, or they feel undesired. And finally, Danny immigrated to Canada from Ghana when he was a teenager. So that's an additional piece of information that we will want to address, because these cases are usually very layered, and the cultural component of it is always important to attend to, so that we can understand where these individuals learned about sexuality. So for Rachel and Danny, out of our 20 problems there, we've identified 2. Okay, and they're both in the biopsychosocial holistic model, the piece of sex addiction or out of control sexual behavior, which obviously needs to be talked about with this couple, and that affairs piece. So the non-consensual, even the non-consensual emotional choice that Danny's making to go towards porn instead of Rachel. And her view of that as being cheating, or as a betrayal. So those are the 2 big problems that we're identifying from Rachel and Danny's presentation that we will then address as solutions in this afternoon. Marnie is our second client. So Marnie is 30. She's recently gotten out of a bad relationship, and she thinks that she's never had good sex because she's never really enjoyed it. In fact, being intimate, her words, intimate, made her nauseous in the past. So she had quite a reaction to intimacy, as she would refer to it as. So we find out that Marnie was sexually abused at the age of 11 by one of her mom's boyfriends. She's been diagnosed already with female interest disorder and anorgasmia by her GP, her physician. Her physician has talked about flibanserin. So she's a bit confused also about what that is going to mean for her, because coming from the medical model, that makes sense. Here's a pill, and so she's going to want to talk about if that's actually a way that she wants to go with it. Finally, Marnie identifies as fat, and she says that she has polycystic ovarian syndrome. So those are a couple of things for us to also consider. And we'll talk a little bit more about using the word fat, as I said, a little bit later as well, when we get into that. So with Marnie, we have 4 different problems that we've identified: the female sexual interest or arousal disorder, female orgasmic disorder, sexual shame, and her trauma from the sexual abuse. So those are the 4 problems that we're picking out from Marnie's description, and that's where we're going to intervene later. Tim and Daryl. So Tim, he's 48, Daryl's 35. They've been married for 3 years. Daryl says that he has way more desire for sex than Tim, and Tim never initiates sex. So that's something that they want to talk about and figure out. They're also considering another sexual lifestyle as a possible solution to some of their sexual issues. So they've considered polyamory and swinging, but they want to talk a bit more about that and decide whether or not that's right for them. So Tim and Daryl, they both had traumatic and extremely shameful coming out experiences, but they were also unique experiences. So we don't want to put a blanket over both of those experiences. We want to understand the uniqueness of it. And then finally, Daryl is also wondering about his sexual orientation. So he's been with women, he's been with men, and he's not totally sure about what his sexual orientation may be. So that's another thing that will need to be discussed with this couple. So we have 5 problems that are identified that we want to work on for Tim and Daryl. So the male hypoactive sexual desire disorder. We want to talk to them about their desire mismatch, their seeming arousal mismatch. We got to talk about initiation expectations and how that initiation doesn't seem to be going smoothly for them. And we need to talk about monogamy and other types of relationships with them. So those are the 5 areas that we'll try to find some solutions to help them. Our 4th client is Wayne. So Wayne is 61. He's been diagnosed by from his physician with erectile disorder. He also says that he's had premature ejaculation and delayed ejaculation occasionally. And the first time Wayne comes in, he sees you alone. He says that it's his problem to deal with. And that's fairly frequent in sex therapy, is that there's an identified problem person, or there's one person whose issues need to be managed much more than the other one. And that's always an interesting way that couples already start to decide what they think of the nature of the issue before they come in, right? So, and in using this example, what I want to say is that these issues that Wayne is coming into and having all of these mechanical issues basically around his performance, like really very focused on his penis, and his ability to orgasm at the time that he wants to. He feels like that's just up to him to figure out. And I'm going to try to tell him that so much of that is really relational. And let's see, can we bring in his partner? So his partner is Anne. She's 58. She agrees to attend the second session with him. And we find out that she's recently finished treatment for cervical cancer, and vaginal intercourse has been painful for her since. She wants to have more intercourse with less pain. That's what her goal is. So she is also very focused on intercourse as being what she would understand to be successful or sufficient, satisfactory sexuality for her. Then, as you're working with this couple, and in the 20th session, so that's you've been seeing these people for quite some time, and she just discloses in the 20th session, and you would have asked this before, but she didn't say it. Now she feels more comfortable saying it a little bit later, that she grew up very conservative and in a very religious home. And her father was the leader, the authority. He was like running a military operation in the home. Everybody had to listen. It was very rigid, and dad was in charge. And then we find out that Wayne thinks that he's into BDSM and wants to introduce Anne to the lifestyle, but is scared of how she's going to react. So he hasn't done this yet, but he thinks that it's something that maybe they could benefit from doing together. So for Wayne and Anne, they have these problems that we are going to look at. The genital pelvic pain penetration disorder. We're going to need to talk about that. We want to talk about erectile disorder, premature ejaculation, delayed ejaculation. Those are all issues that they mentioned. And then substance medication-induced sexual disorder. So that's, Anne's treatment from her cancer. What was all involved there? What was the nature of the treatment? Radiation? Did she have surgery? What's going on there? Do we know what the potential impact is on her genital area? We would need to be able to consult with her gynecologist, or have a letter that helps us understand a bit better what the nature of the impacts of the treatment for cancer were. And then sexual shame is going to be another area that we want to look at for Wayne and Anne, mostly because Anne is very reluctant to engage in conversations about sexuality. She didn't want to come to the first session. It took her a while to open up, to start talking about some of the things that might be important, like her father's patriarchal attitude. And so we're going to talk about sexual shame with Wayne and Anne as well. So they have 6. So some of the clients that we're looking at only have 2. It has 4, 5, 6. So when we get into the solutions, those are the areas that we're going to focus on for each of these clients. It doesn't mean that you couldn't also talk about other things with them. Like you could talk about desire mismatch probably with Wayne and Anne, but I don't want to be too redundant in talking about these. So I'm just kind of choosing a few from each of the client profiles, and then we'll go through, we'll have gone through most of, not all, I think 17 out of 20 or 17 out of 21, we will have discussed each of the problems, discuss them as what the solutions can be. We'll get through like 90% of them today. There's just a few that we're not going into, the other specified sexual disorders, unspecified sexual disorders, that doesn't come up very frequently, enough for a presentation like today to put that in. So that is those are our clients. So everybody should also have their handouts of the full client descriptions. Keep them kind of handy with you. In the next portion, we'll be talking about the sex therapy concepts that we're going to apply in trying to construct solutions for these clients. So keep the client profiles around to see how you might fit that in using these sex therapy concepts. And that's where we're going to go after the break here.